Oh, welcome to another episode of The Growth Compass. I want to make two shout outs on this Tuesday afternoon. One to the sponsor, Senders, for making this possible. They do cold email deliverability. If you listen to this podcast, you know what I'm talking about. Reach out to me if you're interested in doing cold email correctly. Second shout out is to our guest today, Raphael Rosen. What's going on?
Pleasure to be here. Thanks, Blake.
Yeah, thanks for coming. So, me personally, very excited. Have a lot of questions for you. I almost asked all of them just before we hopped on this call together. But if we could just start with a quick introduction of who you are and what you're working on right now.
Yeah. So I'm Raphael Rosen. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Carbon Lighthouse. Carbon Lighthouse, what I care about personally, what we started the company for, is to make it really profitable for people to reduce how much pollution comes out of the built environment. We actually started 15 years ago now, and we're still very much a startup, learning all the time how to help our customers succeed in new and better and faster ways.
Cool. Well, yeah, I read through your guys' website. You have a really interesting application for how to achieve that. I'm aware of a number of companies in the space doing similar things, but I'm excited to hear about your approach. Before we get into that, I did read on your LinkedIn there was some previous relationship with like particle colliders or accelerators or something like that. So, can you take me through, where you're from originally, how you ended up deep in physics land, if I understand correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. Originally from Berkeley, California.
Oh, nice.
Still very much a Golden Bears fan, even though I happily live in New York City now. Um, I studied physics as well as the history of physics, as well as many other things I was lucky enough to do in college, and then did a master's in physics and semiconductor physics. So the little things that make our computers work and phones work and all those things, studying sort of the next generation quantum computing of that. But I was much more interested really in applications to energy and environment and climate. And that's what I started working on almost 20 years ago. And I've been really lucky to get to work on ever since.
Yeah. Yeah. So if Carbon Lighthouse has been around for about 15 years now, how many experiences or different things did you have going on before you started the company?
So many.
Okay.
So many things. Being an entrepreneur is both something I think was inevitable that I would try, and that I really like to just try new things. And I'm not that interested in being artificially constrained by what has been tried before, even though I think there's a lot of wisdom in what's been tried before. So there were I had started, I had gardening companies that I would start, and I had test prep companies that I would start even in college and things like that. I had
Nice.
did freelance work as a writer. I lived in Argentina for a year as a writer, traveling and living there.
What?
I was a bartender when I lived in England when I was doing my master's. So I've got a pretty fun, pretty fun mix of things. I worked briefly at a high frequency trading hedge fund, which was an interesting experience with some great mentorship. I worked briefly in clean tech venture capital, and then I spent a couple of years helping build a solar finance and development company called Safari Energy, which we exited to a utility.
Congrats.
Those were some of the adventures. Yeah, thank you.
Cool. So something that I've wanted to make a point on this podcast, and something that I think usually gets overlooked on other podcasts that I listen to, are so the main focus of the conversation is obviously Carbon Lighthouse. Very interested in your guys' application, your growth thus far. Leading up to who Raphael was at the beginning of that company, like you said, you did a million things. I think I would ask if you choose and focus on just two of the things that you did that that helped you become the type of person that ends up starting this company, or two experiences that you've seen have been strictly useful in you running this company so far.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I'll start with the one that I experienced personally, which is the year that I got to spend living in Argentina and in South America was definitely very important in many ways. Yeah, but one of those was just getting to see more parts of the world and see acceleration of environmental degradation. Also see the way different developing countries do natural rights exploration and exploitation, and what all that meant for the environment was a really great experience. And was able to support myself while I was living down there and trying to figure out the best way to contribute. So I think if one is able to scratch together whatever living you can while doing something really, really interesting, think it's amazing. Yeah, so that experience of just going around traveling, meeting lots of people, seeing lots of things, lots of different environments was enormously valuable for me. Yeah,
Well, you had said
go ahead.
you had said you were writing when you were doing that.
Yeah, I was doing some freelance writing while I was there to make a little bit of money. I also worked at the hedge fund for a little bit before I went, so I could save up and go do that. But I think creating freedom for yourself gives you a sense of agency to then go do whatever you can in the world with what you have. And I think that mindset and being able to prove to myself that I could do that for that year, that was part of what gave me the confidence and freedom to go pursue building the businesses that I really wanted to pursue.
Awesome.
I've been lucky to do for so many years now.
Awesome. So confidence and
Yeah,
agency.
yeah. And then the second thing I think is really informative is my dad is a physicist. He works at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, and he studies laser fusion, so how to create limitless clean energy on Earth. And he has been doing that for more than 50 years.
Wow.
And he's been working on one problem for 50 years. And two and a half years ago, they finally achieved energy gain. And I think that, yeah, which was amazing. It was written up, it was all over the news.
We
And
could
since
spend the
then,
whole
they've had
episode
more and more
talking about
breakthroughs.
that.
Yeah, we could easily spend the whole time, but the journey to that, and he wrote a cool history paper on it recently as well. But the journey to that, just filled with setback after setback after setback. If you ever listen to Uri Levine, the founder of Waze, he talks about the greatest thing an entrepreneur can do is just keep going and never give up. And I think having that example from him, he cared so much about his mission of trying to create clean energy and energy security, and he just never, ever, ever gave up. And then had this amazing result a few years ago. I think that was also very informative to building the mindset needed to do something.
Well, congrats. I have this I don't know how loud it's going to be in your headphones, but I have this
Turn the volume down.
it should play. No, it's not looking like it's playing, but we'll cheer. We'll go, yeah! It was supposed to be an audio cheer. No, that's really cool.
Nice.
So have you seen then with the application of that concept of never giving up, just indulging in curiosity, I guess, is there a specific time in the last 15 years where that concept has been super important to you?
Yeah, I would say probably the most significant time of never giving up that played out was probably the first year of the company, where it was just so hard to get anything going, and there were several times where within 1 or 2 months of saying, "All right, I don't think we have anything here. We need to shut down." And I think that those were our first year. The other example that comes to mind was 10 years in. At that point, we'd grown the company very large. We'd raised a lot of capital. We had a good number of customers, and we're always like working hard to get the next set of customers to keep up the growth we were trying. And then in February of 2020, we found ourselves with a business where we were flying people all around the country to go into commercial office buildings to collect data on energy. And that
Wow.
was not a good business to be in when all of a sudden we were barred from going into office buildings, barred from going on planes. And the sector which we service still, like, it was primarily office customers that we had, and they're still working through, the valuations, come down 40%, but many places they still need to come down another 20% till the market finally lands. So we had to pivot out of that, change the company, accelerate the technology roadmap, change everything.
Wow.
And that was emotionally very, very painful for all kinds of reasons. But yeah, you just have to find a way to keep going.
Let's go. Firing me up. So I made it. I do want to spend most of the time because I had one thing that I was like, particle collider. Please explain. But anyway, so if you could give us a run through of your guys' application, how you actually partner with these commercial spaces, if it's still strictly commercial spaces or if it's also residential, what it is actually that you guys do. Because from my understanding, there is a software stack that you guys either have internally or you offer to the client, and there's also hardware involved somewhere. So, I mean, I'll let you explain it, but yeah. So if you
Yeah,
could just give a rundown.
unfortunately, to find a solution that works for commercial real estate involved something very, very complicated. But to simplify it, we rent mechanical rooms from commercial real estate owners. So these are medical office buildings, like where you go for an outpatient procedure, like those types of buildings. There are also traditional office buildings. Sometimes it's apartment buildings. Sometimes it's a large shopping center. It's buildings of that type. It's not a single family home. But we partner with folks like that, and we pay them rent to be able to rent a little bit of space in their mechanical room. The reason that we are paying them rent is because of the way commercial real estate leases work, which basically says if you're a landlord and you invest in reducing energy consumption in your property, all of the benefit is going to go to your tenants. And you may be able to recover some of your costs and your investment, but you can't actually make money doing that. And so what we have pioneered and we do in hundreds and hundreds of buildings across the country in 46 states is we work with property teams. We help them figure out which projects will be best for their building to reduce energy consumption. And then we measure how much they've reduced energy consumption. So how much have they reduced, how hard the fans are working, how hard the pumps are working, how much energy the lights consume. We measure all of that. And then based on those measured savings, we pay half of those savings to the landlord. The other half of the savings go to the tenants, and we get a small fee as part of that, which is how we make money. So through this structure that we've created, landlords are now able to get a really great return on reducing energy consumption in their building. Tenants still get a huge amount of benefit, in fact, more benefit because their landlords are investing more. And we have a business model that helps the environment and lets us make money too.
Wow. So what exactly was the uh, what was miscommunication, I guess, between or the lack of incentive where you were able to step in? Because from my perspective, again, you guys are coming in, you guys are measuring where you can reduce energy consumption, you are doing it, and then all of a sudden there's money for the landlord, the tenant, and you guys. So
Yeah.
I'm curious how
So
that works.
what exists is there's so much wasted energy in commercial buildings. Like if you ever find yourself like, oh, I should turn off this light switch, I should program my thermostat in your home. The same thing happens in every commercial building, except at a much, much larger scale, where huge pieces of equipment just run overnight because no one's really able to pay attention to them. And lights run overnight because no
Got
one's
it.
able to pay attention to them.
Okay.
So that's the same problem. So that opportunity is hundreds of billions of dollars a year that's going to energy expenses that don't need to. The problem is if I'm the landlord and I'm going to spend a bunch of money upgrading my thermostats or upgrading my lights, there's no way for me to get those savings. The leases dictate that all those benefits go to tenants. And so what we've done is stepped in and create a new financial structure that allows basically an escrow to be created and half the savings go to the landlord and half the savings go to the tenants. The landlord makes all the investment and everyone gets to benefit instead of this being misaligned incentives because of the leases.
Cool. So it was really just that the initial incentive that exists, well, it still exists, I guess, does
That
not.
still exists in most leases.
Yeah, so it does not, but it does not encourage a landlord to take action. Because of that, there's just nobody looking at the piece of machinery, the lights being left on, saying, "Hey, we should do something about this." They're just like, "Well, I mean, it's just happening. It's whatever." But that's what the
Yeah,
opportunity is.
yeah.
So cool. How has you said you've been doing this for a while now? How has your two things? How has your product changed over the course of time, and how has your understanding of your market changed over time?
Yeah, fun questions. The way the product has changed is we've made things much simpler and easier for customers, and we've also made things much simpler and easier for ourselves. And so the way we've done that is partly through technology and partly through leaning into customers and what's easy for them to do. So we used to sort of have a much more command and control approach. We'll come in, we'll figure out everything that's wrong, we'll figure out how to make it run better, we'll hire contractors to make it run better for you, we'll do all of that. Yeah, and that in theory would make it easier for customers. What we saw is ultimately cutting people out of the control loop actually made them less happy and was more difficult. So figuring out ways to use software so that it is easy for customers to do the things they're really good at, like work with the contractor that they already like and know exactly what the scheduled hours are. And we can do the things we're really good at of measure savings, quantify opportunities, make sure the upgrades have been done properly and
That's
successfully.
fascinating.
So that split and finding that line has been a huge benefit and huge change in the product.
How has that
And then
changed the composition of your team?
it definitely shifted us, much more towards being a software company. That's certainly been effective for scaling, but it hasn't totally eliminated the people part. There's still a really critical people part of talking as a human being to each property team to understand what
Yeah.
they need, what works, which tenant, the tenant in Suite 200, like they really hate their flickering lights and we need to go do something about it. Like that's valuable information no one's really going to share unless you spent some amount of time talking to them and understanding what their problems are.
Gotcha. And then yeah, the market. How have you the
Yeah, I'd say the
understanding
market.
of your market? Yeah.
Yeah, no, and the best wisdom I've ever gained was is all from the Startup Owner's Manual by Steve Blank, and I wish that it existed greatly. Wish that it existed when we started Carbon Lighthouse, but when we encounter that and the wisdom of get out of the building, really make sure you understand the customer problem. That's something we've gotten a lot better at over the years. And it serves us enormously well, and that's why when we talk to customers, everything we do is here's a new way to get a bunch of rent in your building. Yeah, there's OpEx, there's energy, there's this escrow structure, these other things, but that sort of all just background information. Like what you need to know is we can get you a bunch more income and it'll save your tenants a bunch of money. Do you want that? And so really putting ourselves in our customers' shoes. I still think I can do much better job of that, and we have done a much, much better job of that compared to when we first started.
Good, good, good. Do you see like a particular propensity for maybe like a certain property management group or a certain city or region of the world or United States or world? I mean, if that's part of the answer, that is more receptive to this type of solution.
No,
That's good.
the reality is everywhere we go, there are people who want to make things better, people who want to make more money, people who want to take better care of their tenants. And there's no geographic or building, limitation to that. For us, the only limitation is the lease structure needs to work for a particular set of buildings, and the landlord needs to be willing, to invest between $10,000 and $50,000 to actually make these things happen and get a great return. So those, I think, people who don't meet those criteria, unfortunately, we can't help. Otherwise, geography, building age, building size, none of that stuff is a hindrance.
So cool. With the theme of the podcast, what I like to talk to people about, it's kind of similar, I guess, to what I asked you about your understanding and your product change. Mostly, what I like discovering with people is their journey with growing their company, their journey with the different strategies, their journey with anything that they've learned over time. So the first question they usually have is, again, over the course of your company, how have your strategies for growth changed?
Yeah, and I'm a person who likes to think from the first principle. So the philosophies that I applied when I started a company and apply now have changed a lot, and that's led to different types of strategies. So the philosophies when it first started were very much philosophies like Jim Collins, built to last, good to great, and those types of approaches of making sure you have the right team and investing heavily in your team and having effective processes and transparency. And all of that I still agree with and has served me well. Um, However, over time, the grounding philosophy of how to build a company and how to really achieve growth is much more Steve Blank, lean startup owner's manual grounded than anything else. And that's because thinking as a physicist, I'm trying to explain the world and how the world works. The way startups work is fundamentally different from how established operating company works. And so in order to have growth, you really have to get the basics right. And I think the lean startup correctly diagnoses that there is nothing for a company without product market fit. And there's no product market fit without huge amounts of time with your customers being very, very willing to be wrong about what you think the problems are and really understand the problems differently. And so the way that then translates to growth is you can grow, and we did grow, and you can build a beautiful company with a beautiful culture and a lot of things to be proud of. But that company won't ever really take off if you build it on those principles that help build big companies. It will only actually achieve lasting strength and velocity if you build it on the principles of lean startup. Right? Find the product market fit, find what customers care about, find the pains that they really, really want solved, and make sure you're speaking to those. And once you have those, then all the motions in marketing and sales and things that you do to growth, then those will actually start to have real traction.
So, as far as the tactics of getting to those customer conversations, was it a lot of you guys do commercial buildings? I have a lot of experience with with a coffee product that also serves office spaces. So this comes from personal experience. This question: did you send people? Did you yourself just walk into places, talk to property management groups? I mean, they're usually really receptive in person. Do you do cold email? Do you do cold calls? Do you have an inbound strategy? Those types of things to get to
Yeah.
those conversations, because I really like that you're talking about those first principles, all of those concepts. So people don't get into those, so I'm glad that you're
Yeah.
doing it.
Yeah, no, as far as the actual tactics, I mean, to start, it was massive amounts of cold calling and cold emailing. I think
Cool.
between for 700 and 800 people that we reached out to by phone to start to get our first few customers. And then from there, it was referral driven. And then there was a lot more conference strategy. But there was always cold emailing and cold calling as part of the strategy. Um, and and events and other things like that have also been useful. But far and away, the tactics that I come back to that I find the most helpful for learning and for velocity and repeatability just continue to be cold email with calls and then conferences as tactics. And it's super sector specific. That's why coming back to the first principles of what actually works, like you need to figure out what what ways to reach people actually work with your particular clients. And for us, email calls and conferences are far and away the most effective channels to find people.
Cool. So as far as like a grouping, I guess, of, because depends who you talk to, whether they like to put it in buckets or not. But I guess for the sake of conversation, the cold email, cold call is very outbound intensive. Do you guys have much focus on inbound? Does that work for you guys, or is it mostly just there
We've
to
had a bunch
support
of
that?
different inbound campaigns. Yeah, and we have a new inbound campaign that's underway as well. But I think that works especially well if the problem is really well defined in the marketplace. And for us, our problem is not well defined in the marketplace. Like most people, once they become aware of the problem, then they're very interested in it. But the fact that the way your lease structures are written is preventing you from getting a 62% return on your investment, that's not a problem people are aware of. So because there's so much education about it, it's primarily going to be outbound, that as opposed to people who have this problem. They go through a nurture campaign and they say, "Oh wow, this company really understands my problem."
Gotcha, gotcha. So you're saying based on the type, based on the perception, how people experience the problem, whether they're problem aware, problem seeking, these types of steps, because of how your customers exist in the market, the cold outreach is more effective for you.
Correct. Yeah, I think it depends on your market and the nature of the problem in the market. And so if there's a large amount of education to do, outbound can be very, very difficult. If there's not much education to do and your customers are on email all the time, then inbound can be very effective.
Yeah. Well, so I have three more questions for you. This is just
All
out of
right, I'll keep my
curiosity.
answers short.
That's all good. But just in addition to those three, because you mentioned that, how I got into this podcast, I got involved with the sponsor stuff like that was because I was in a community. We're all doing cold outreach email. And then, early last year, everything blew up and I had no idea why, because of the restrictions and everything. So how did you guys navigate, the last year as far as email, as cold email got more difficult?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we're just always looking at the results of our email and asking on a weekly basis what's causing this change, what's causing this delta, and then figuring out what the best practices are, talking to other people, updating the strategy for the next week, and then seeing how.
Sweet. Awesome. Well, I'm glad, because some people are like, oh my God, I didn't know what to do. And all this stuff happened. I'm glad that you guys have, it sounds like you guys are really structured. You have things in set to support those conversations. So my first question, what is your biggest problem that you're navigating at the moment?
I don't know if it's a problem so much as the biggest opportunity I'm excited about is how could we work more with brokers, commercial brokers, because that's a part of the real estate world that doesn't currently fit in neatly to what we're doing. It's not an obstacle, but it seems like a huge growth lever. So how can we play around with what we could offer to brokers to make them allies in helping us scale faster?
Cool. How are you currently addressing that?
We just don't interact with brokers.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, like, is it something as
Yeah.
far as like it's an opportunity? Is it something that you are pursuing now?
Yeah,
Is
it's
it
an
something that's
opportunity.
just
Yeah,
yeah?
we're prepping some experiments to run in a couple of weeks outreach to brokers for exactly that purpose.
Awesome, awesome.
Yeah.
And then lastly, Raphael, because personally, this conversation, people like you, companies like you, are inspiring to me. I'm curious, and it can be small, it can be overarching, something that happened recently. But what inspires you?
I'll give one from last night, which is my daughter is been learning to read, and 6 months ago she could read okay, like read a little picture book. Yeah, she's 6 years old. Um, and in the last few weeks she can just read entire 100-page books. Yeah, and so to see the rate of learning, and some of that's obviously just like age related, but I don't think it's that much age related. I think if you really commit yourself to learning something and every day working on it, work hard on it, even when it's hard, the amount of growth we can do is amazing. So I watch her, yeah, and I'm inspired by how much growth she has in so little time. And I think grown-ups, if 6-year-olds can do it, grown-ups can do it too.
That is an amazing example. That's so tangible. Well, Raphael, thank you so much for the thoughtful conversation, answering all the questions. Wish we had like 7 more hours, but I guess I'll just type those million questions on email over to you. But no, I appreciate it. So if people want to reach out, if people want to find more information about your company, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn.